Welcome to ICU Doc Talk. Thanks for joining me again today. This is a podcast where I talk about medicine. I am an ICU doctor and a double-boarded anesthesiologist, and I share stories about medicine. I talk about lots of different intensive care topics. And then towards the end of the podcast, I usually read emails and talk about books and kind of go from there. So thank you for joining me again today. Let's start out with an email. Oh, no, I have big news. Yes, I have big news. So as many of my listeners know, or if you're new, you may not know. So I do TikTok, right? I have a TikTok, social media channel called ICU Doc. ICU Doc is my handle on TikTok. And then I mirror that same content on Instagram. It's the same stuff. I stopped doing that over a year ago because I really started to hate doing it. So I haven't made any new content on there. I don't even open those apps because I got so sick of it. But I still do this podcast, obviously. Anyway, what's my big news? Here it is. I am back to making content, but I'm not doing it on TikTok, and I'm not doing it on Instagram, and I'm not really talking about medicine either. So you might be a little disappointed. But my big news is I now have a YouTube channel. It's brand new. It's called Wick Welker Reads. All right? Wick Welker Reads. I'll put the link here in the podcast thing so you can click on it if you want. And what am I doing on it? I'm talking about sci-fi and fantasy. The thing I want to do. Okay. So if you miss my face, my current face, I don't know why you would, but if you miss it, and you want to see my hot takes and longer takes on books, I also do some nonfiction on there as well. And it's just brand new. It just started like a month ago. You can go and subscribe to my new YouTube channel. And I post stuff almost every day on it. Certainly every week. And I'm just starting to get it going. So go check it out. If you want to see it, it's Wick Welker Reads. And I also have a new website. It's wickwelker.com. About my books and stuff. So you can check that out. You can join my newsletter. I have a newsletter. I'm really growing. I'm really maturing as a content creator and an author. I'm like 5 years too late doing this, but I actually have a website. So check it out, wickwelker.com. And you can join my newsletter. You can get some free books stuff and see what I do with my author stuff. Anyway, that's my big news. And I'm actually really excited about it. I'm actually excited to make the content. Rather, when I did the other medical social media stuff, it just got so toxic with politics and stuff. I really dreaded it. I really hated it, and still do. But anyway, that's my big news. So let's move on. I got a lot of good emails. Let's just kind of read emails and talk, and I'll share some stories and stuff like that. All right, let's do that. And let's start with this one email, which is good. It says, "Hi Doc, let's see. Is it okay if I read this? I think it is. I'll leave off some personal information. But this person is a resident in medicine in intensive care. And they say, I am writing to tell you that you're a huge inspiration to me and your podcast brings a lot of joy, motivation, and real value to my life. And this person is writing from not in the United States, outside the United States. As a question, I was wondering, how do you stay calm in an emergency and disastrous situations? Does it get better with time and experience? And how much time and experience is necessary? Were you nervous when you were younger? And were you always able to think clearly in such hard times? Finally, in your last podcast episode, you said that you could send out an ebook version of St. Elspeth. Oh, yeah. Which I think I said to this person. If that still stands, if you want my book, St. Elspeth, which just won a big award, and I think it's the best thing I've written, and you're a listener, just email me at ICUDoc. What is my email? ICUDoctorECMO@gmail.com, and I'll send you a free ebook just for being a listener. And I think it's a good book. I do. And I think I sent that to this person. But let's talk about emergency and disaster situations and how I handle that. And I'm going to let's share a story that happened fairly recently from the operating room. But before I get into the story, let me, just to address this question more specifically, how do you stay calm in emergency and disaster situation? Does it get better with time and experience? And how much time and experience is necessary? So let me answer that directly first. The answer is yes. It definitely gets better with time and experience. 100%. Of course it does. There are if you do something, so there's high acuity, right, which is scary. High acuity means, a medical emergency, chest compression, CPR, high acuity. But if you do something with high frequency, you get used to it. High acuity, high frequency experience, you get used to it. You get better at it. You see the patterns, right? The pattern recognition, et cetera, et cetera. You get better at remaining calm. 100% you do, and that's been my own experience. Me personally, I think, I don't know. Maybe just soon after out of training, I felt pretty comfortable. But I think don't let that scare you, because I do think it can take years for some people. And I think I am also just a particularly the right kind of personality for medical emergencies. And I actually do think that matters. Not everybody has the personality for it. Maybe the disposition. It's something you can learn, but it might cause a lot of stress and anxiety to you. And honestly, it is something you should figure out before you go into a field like that. Not medicine, but like critical care, anesthesiology. If you're able to kind of roll with things. Another big part of it is just people take too much moral responsibility on themselves over their shoulders. Like, oh, it's all my fault, blah, blah, blah. And what that is ego. Okay. It's kind of ironic. People that like, oh, I should have done this better. I should have done this better. That's fine. Reflecting and trying to improve yourself, of course, is good and desirable. But when you perseverate about yourself and your actions and what they did and the impact, it's actually, ironically, kind of an ego thing. So you need to shrink that ego, understand, embrace uncertainty, embrace chaos, understand that you work within a complex environment that is also collaborative, and maybe your actions don't have as much weight as you think they do. And also, you're not responsible for the entire health of a person. Many things led up to them going to cardiac arrest. Many things 20 years prior led up to that event. So the outcome of that should not rest on your shoulders alone. That is one thing to really keep in mind. I'm sorry, I think there's construction going on. Hang on. Sorry, I'm sitting in my office and there's lots of construction in the ceilings and walls and workers falling out of every corner. I'll keep talking here. I'll shut it off if it becomes too much. Anyway, so let me just let me go to this story that happened recently. I was in the operating room. This is during my anesthesia part of my practice, and I had a resident in the room as well. And the surgery was a plastic surgery, a nerve reconstruction of the face for somebody, I believe, who had a brain tumor, and that brain tumor caused a bunch of nerve paralysis of the face, and so they were getting nerve facial reconstruction to help with that. So a pretty basic case, kind of a basic anesthesia, pretty boring. It's one of those cases that I'm like, sweet, I barely need to rub two brain cells together to think about this. So we, of course, that's a nice setup for a disaster, right? That we start that way. So we got the patient off to sleep. Everything was fine. And, when I have residents, I do a lot of teaching in the OR. We teach in different ways. We teach clinical skills. We teach clinical knowledge, et cetera. And one of the things I was teaching this resident, and I'll teach you this as well. I'll bring you in on this teaching session that we have. So talking about, hey, things are going wrong with a patient and, being scared and things like that. That's kind of the theme here. One thing that scares me, that gets my mouth dry and my heart racing, is hypoxia. Okay. Now it depends. Losing an airway, I should be more specific. Now, what do I mean by losing an airway? It's when you lose control of a patient's airway and then they're hypoxic, their pulse ox is going down and they're about to arrest, or they have arrested. That's scary. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. That's scary. The thing is with hypoxia, it's unforgiving. You have to act immediately. Things like a tachyarrhythmia or, VTach or these other things or hypotension or shock state. You have a little more time to think, collect your thoughts, and to act. You can do those things quickly. And there's some things that are more straightforward, right? Like, oh, someone's in VTach. There's an algorithmic thinking for that, right? I can, stable, unstable, go down that list. Now, there's algorithmic thinking as well with losing an airway. In the United States, we call it the difficult airway algorithm, which is extremely useful, right? And when you're an anesthesiologist, you understand that algorithm intuitively. You don't even need to think about it. It's a reflex, that algorithm. But hypoxia is scary because here's why it's scary, okay? If you lose an airway and then that patient arrests, so it's a hypoxic arrest, PEA, hypoxic or an asystolic arrest, usually PEA, you have to return their body to getting oxygenated and ventilating quickly, or they will get irreversible anoxic brain injury within 5 minutes, maybe 7, maybe 8. It's very unforgiving. You compare that to someone who's arrested from VTAC. Let's say someone is in VT storming and they arrest, and you're shocking them. Well, you're oxygenating them. Presumably, you put in an airway and you have a breathing tube, and you're oxygenating and ventilating them just fine. And now you're just working on circulation. That's that's way more survivable situation than if someone has had hypoxic arrest. If someone has hypoxic arrest and it's been 10 minutes of chest compressions and you still haven't controlled their airway and are ventilating, their chances of survival is very low. The brain needs oxygen. That's it. So that's why it's scary. That's why you got to do something. You have to act quickly. Now, one of the things I was teaching this resident is about hypoxia, what you do in the OR or in the ICU. And one of the main principles I teach is you cannot spin your wheels. If you're spinning your wheels, move on to the next thing. Okay, you've lost the airway. You can't bag mask ventilate, or you can't put in a breathing tube by direct laryngoscopy. Well, stop trying to do that same thing. Move on. Move on to the next thing, whether that's an LMA or video laryngoscopy, GlideScope in the United States. Fiber optic. Usually a fiber optic is not your friend in an emergent airway situation. Okay, let me pass that word of wisdom to you. That is usually not your friend, because the problems of obtaining that airway, a fiber optic scope is probably not going to help you. It's not because you probably have bleeding in the airway, you have swelling in the airway. A fiber optic is going to be useless in that situation. So you should not be reaching for a fiber optic airway when you're way down the difficult airway algorithm and trying to establish an airway. That's not your friend. You're going to be wasting time. So one of my points is, if you can't get, you've tried a bunch of ways to put in a tube, and you've tried in an LMA, which is called a laryngeal mask airway in the United States, or SGA, supraglottic airway, and that doesn't work, you got to put a hole in their neck and breathe for them through their neck. You got to do it swiftly. You do not waste time. And that's one of the main things I was talking about with this resident. And that's knowledge I want to share with you. And if you're an anesthesiologist, okay, this is for the anesthesiologists out there, or if you're an anesthesia resident, you need to do the surgical airway. If there's not a surgeon to do it, you do. You need to do it, okay? If you have lost an airway and there's chest compressions ongoing, and it's a hypoxic arrest, and someone said, "Oh, I called ENT, the ear, nose, and throat doctors, or I called the trauma surgeon, they're coming," you don't wait for them. You do it, okay? I know I'm lecturing, because it's your responsibility to establish the airway. You need to do it. If you wait and they come, I don't know where they are. Are they at home? Where are they? If you wait another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes, and you're still chest compressions, you have delayed the patient establishing airway, and they're going to get irreversible anoxic brain injury, and they're going to die. Okay? You need to do it. If it comes down to you, you must do it. Do an emergent percutaneous cricothyrotomy. Needle in the neck, wire, trach, down. And I've done it before. Okay? I've done it. You need to know how to do it. That's your job. And what was my point? Here's my point. If someone arrests and you say it's a PEA arrest, and you're doing chest compressions, and you're sitting there wondering, and they don't have an airway yet, right? And you're sitting there wondering, I wonder why this patient arrested. And then you put in a breathing tube and you get ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation, in like 5 seconds. It's hypoxia. It is. It's almost diagnostic. All the coronary arteries need are just a little oxygen, and the heart will start pumping back if it's a hypoxic arrest. Okay, anyway, let's get back. So I was teaching these things to this resident, and let's get back to this case. So we're in this boring case, right? And I'm like, anyway, so I taught these things, and I leave the room. 5 minutes later, a code blue is called in that operating room. But like, seriously, 5 minutes later, a code blue is called in the room with my resident in the case. That's my patient that I'm covering. Okay. And for those that are not aware of how anesthesia works, I cover multiple rooms, right? I cover up to 4 rooms. I'm going from room to room, covering patients, and there's always an anesthesia provider, either a nurse anesthetist or an anesthesia resident in my room. So I go about covering different operating rooms. I pre-op patients, I post-op patients, I do lots of stuff. So there's a code blue in that room. I'm like, okay. So I run to that room, and here's my approach. And I've shared my approach to responding to a critical situation, even if it's my room, it's a situation I know. I do this every time. I look at the patient, I see what people are doing to the patient. I looked at the patient's head was blue. Okay? It was blue. It was cyanotic. I looked at the vitals. This is what I always do. I look at the vitals. What are the vitals? The patient's pulse ox was about 30%, right? So if you look right away at the patient and then the vitals, you can very quickly get oriented to a situation. So I was oriented to that situation in zero point 0.3 seconds of coming into the room. I knew what was going on. Now, I didn't know the cause yet, right? I did not know the cause, but I knew the reason was the patient was hypoxic. Now, the patient had an arterial line, so I could see that the patient had a pulse. So it wasn't an arrest yet, but it was damn close. So now I had a bunch of help in that room, right? I have colleagues. Now the room is flooding. I work at an American academic institution with lots of great colleagues. And when there's a problem like this, you got a lot of help, which is great. So I come into the room. I can see the patient's hypoxic. 5 minutes after lecturing the resident about the patient being hypoxic. So what was I feeling? Let me just pause. What was I feeling here? Did I have anxiety? No, I really didn't, to be honest. I knew it was going to be okay. I just knew it. I knew that we all together would get this patient through that, even if they arrested. Now, why did I feel that way? I don't know. Yeah, that comes with experience, but also I work in a really great collaborative environment with amazing people. I knew we were going to figure it out. I just knew it. So I wasn't nervous. I knew we were going to bring that patient out of it and that we were going to finish the surgery and everything was going to be fine. So transient hypoxia is not harmful. It's not dangerous. It probably causes some subclinical harm, I would imagine, to your cells. But someone who's hypoxic and with a head that's blue, like his head was literally blue. If you're not in the medical world, people literally go blue when they don't have enough oxygen. Their lips go blue, their skin goes blue. That is true. It's a literal thing. But if you can get someone, if it's transient, a minute of that or whatever, you don't suffer brain damage. You don't, or any end organ damage. Okay, so I'm standing there and I was feeling calm. I was, and to address this email, that comes with experience. If I were a resident, do you think I was calm? Do you think the resident was calm? No, of course not. she was. I'm sure her mind was a chaotic mess, right? Okay, so I'm in the room. And someone says, let's give 100 milligrams of rocuronium. And I'm like, great idea, let's do that. So that's a paralytic. That's a great move, okay, in acute hypoxia because you're stopping the body. I don't know what's causing this, right? But you're stopping the body from moving, and that might solve all of your problems depending on what's going on. And as that rocuronium is going in, we look at the patient, and they're chewing on the tube, the breathing tube. They're biting down. They're clamped down on the breathing tube. So that was the problem. The patient got too light. Their anesthetic got too light. They clamped down. Now, the patient wasn't awake. The reflexes were coming back on board. So he was clamped down on the breathing tube, and he was stopping ventilating and oxygenation, and he was hypoxic from that. The 100 milligrams of rocuronium is going to stop that in about 10 seconds, right? It's going to relax, and we're going to be able to ventilate. So I knew it was going to be fine. Now, in this particular case, why did that happen? Why was the anesthetic light? I will tell you, and this is the debriefing I had with the resident. The reason that happened was because the surgeons wanted a very specific blood pressure parameter, very tight blood pressure. They wanted the blood pressure not too high because they didn't want bleeding into their field. If someone's blood pressure is too high, they can get a little more bleeding in their field. And when you're working in the face, you're working in the small surgical field, so it's a very reasonable thing. Be like, hey, we don't want the blood pressure high. In fact, they wanted it low. They wanted a little bit of permissive hypotension, which was appropriate in this patient. So we were trying to achieve that. But the thing is, we would you can go up on your anesthetic within reason to bring your blood pressure down a little bit. You can't overdose your anesthetic. But the thing, and then the blood pressure goes down, but then he would get too soft and we would lighten it up, and then he was super labile. His blood pressure was up and down, up and down, up and down for like 2 hours. So because of that, the patient was getting too light and got too light, and reflexes came on board, and that happened. Everything was fine, just like I knew it would be. Arrests in the operating room often, assuming it's not trauma or something like that, usually go okay. They're usually immediately reversible. Cardiac arrests that happen in an elective surgery. That's one of the reasons we always, in the United States at least, in common practice, is when someone has a DNR, do not resuscitate, you reverse that when they have surgery. Because if they were going to have arrest in the operating room, you should resuscitate them, because the reason for the arrest is usually iatrogenic. Usually we cause it somehow, and it's probably immediately reversible, which it was for this patient. So we got patient did fine, did great. We finished the surgery. Patient did fine, and then of course I debriefed with the resident to go over everything, because that's scary when you're a trainee, right? That's scary. That's scary. But I will tell you, it definitely, with experience, high frequency, high acuity, you get used to it. Not only do you get used to it, you love it. You just love it. You start loving it. And then when you find yourself in these situations where you're not thinking clearly, because a panic brain doesn't think clearly. You know that. Everybody knows that. When you're panicked and stressed, you can't think clearly. And that still happens to me. I'm not saying, I'm not like above it, right? My brain is just, it's flesh, right? It's neurons. It's just, there's nothing special. But so that happens to me. You need to listen to the calm person, the person that grabs your shoulder and whispers something in your ear, because they're the fresh eyes person. They're coming in that room and they are seeing something that you're not. Maybe it's something obvious. Maybe it's not. Doesn't matter. Okay. You listen to them. You could think about it. I can't tell you how many times, like, I'll hear that, and then in my mind I'll dismiss it a little bit. I'm like, that can't be it. And then you're like, wait a minute. No. Of course, that's a great idea. Let's do that. So you need to be flexible. Whew, that's a really important principle here. You got to be flexible. Too many times I've seen people that are in charge and they'll be inflexible to suggestions and stuff, and it's definitely an ego thing. There's no doubt about it. You need to be flexible and let go of your anchoring bias, whatever you think it is. Let go of that and consider the other possibilities, because they're often correct. They're often right. All right, let's move on. I got some more emails. I got just tons of great emails. Everybody, thank you for emailing. This is from Jared, last name withheld. Hey Doc, it was great to hear you put out a new podcast in December. I did. I know I don't do it very frequently, but I still like doing it. I've been meaning to email since I listened, but kept putting it off. I was sorry to hear about your cat. Losing a part of your family is never easy. Thank you, Jared. It was very hard. I still think about that cat, and I will every day. She was amazing. Anyway, nobody. This is funny. This made me laugh. He says nobody listening cares if you remember or have a structure. I think in my last podcast I was like, oh, I'm such a stupid podcast, worst podcaster. I don't know what my own format is. I personally enjoy the casualness of the podcast, whatever the topic is, medicine, book reviews, and yes, that's even your political takes. As a blue dot in a sea of red, I find it helpful hearing someone with intelligence and sanity discussing these topics. Jared goes on. He says, I've been using your Goodreads reviews. So yeah, I'm on Goodreads. My username is just Wick Welker, as a sort of wish list for things that I would like to read or learn more about. As someone who has always struggled with reading retention, I'd like to ask about your reading habits, if you don't mind. You clearly retain and are able to recall a great deal of what you read. Do you have a process that you follow when you are reading about topics that you're trying to learn about, as opposed to a story you're just reading to enjoy? Yes, Jared, I do. So, okay, when I'm reading nonfiction, I take notes, but it's not homework, right? I'm taking mild notes. It also depends. If it's a new topic, if it's a new kind of book I'm reading, then I'll take a lot of notes. But just in my phone, I have an iPhone, just the notes app, I'll just make a quick little note. And when you make quick notes, it's amazing what it does to recall things when you're thinking of the book when you're done. And then I always write reviews for my books. If you follow me on Goodreads, that old dinosaur social media called Goodreads, you'll see almost basically all of my books have reviews. I write those reviews for myself, because they help me retain. Not only they help me to understand and ingest what I've read when I read a review. Maybe it's a paragraph, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 10 paragraphs, whatever. It helps me ingest, think about, contemplate, and then I get it down. And then 5 years later, when I'm like, what was that book about? I read that review, and it refreshes so much in my mind. It's tremendous what it does. So that's a big part of my process. Jared says, does the ability to retain and recall information come naturally to you? I think it does. I have always had a pretty good memory, not like photographic, of course. But I think, yes, that comes naturally to me, maybe more than some other people. Did you develop that ability over time as you read frequently, or do you have to treat it like studying by taking notes as you read, or going back and rereading passages or chapters? So I kind of answered that question, but I don't go back and reread passages a whole lot. I will sometimes highlight things and then look at those. But it's really about taking just small notes and writing a review. That will help you retain what you're reading. Anyway, I look forward to another podcast at some. I wish you and your family best. Thank you, Jared. I appreciate the email. That was a good one. I hope my answers help. What else do we got here? Oh yeah, this is an important email. Okay, this is from Robert, last name withheld. It says, "Hello, ICU doc. I was on. This is about Facebook impersonator. Yeah, thank you. I was on Facebook today when I saw this account. This is a carbon copy of your account. So he's talking about Facebook. I've never had a Facebook account, but someone, and I've known this for a long time. Someone has just rips off my content. They've just downloaded it from like TikTok and then they put it up. They just copy it to Facebook and they're acting like me. It's called ICU Doctor. You may have. It's got like has 87,000 followers. Oh, it really, really makes me angry. He says, I clicked on it and they are uploading all of your old content and making it seem like it's your genuine account. Now today they have just posted on, this is yesterday, February 18th, he sent this. They just posted on their page and it seems to me like they're getting people to click on some website they obviously control. I know you would never put some random item on your page and claim all the benefits, etc. Looking at the comments, it seems people generally think it is you whose page it is. The people behind this scam are preying on people's inability to detect it is not a genuine account. I thought you'd want to know. My apologies if you're made aware. No, Robert, thank you. I do know about this, and I've tried to get rid of it, and I can't. And this is a really good. I'm glad I'm bringing this up because it's the freaking Wild West. Social media, like we need laws. Like there's basically this person who's uploading all my stuff and acting like me. They did change their account to fan page. It says fan page, but nobody sees that. They think it's me. Everybody on there thinks it's me, like lots of people. And now they posted some herb supplement. Right? So they're trying to hawk some herb supplement. So it's really frustrating. And I've made some posts on my TikTok and Instagram for people to report it. That hasn't done anything. I've reported it, of course. Meta doesn't care. I've even gone to my institution and said, hey, can you reach out to Meta on my behalf and tell them to shut this account down? And that didn't really get anywhere, but I think I need to try that again. So it's really infuriating. And here's the scary part, everybody, is that, so this person is uploading these videos of me. Like, yeah, they're me and they're me saying stuff. So it's not like the worst representation, but what's to stop them from uploading all those videos into an AI generator and then generating new content that's like a deep fake of me? What's to stop them from doing that? And then how could I defend that it's not me? Do you know how weird it is? So I get people at work that come up to me like, hey, I love that video you posted on Facebook. That's happening to me. And it's like a video that I made like 3 years ago on TikTok. And they think it's me currently making a post on Facebook. And I have to say, I get so tired of being like, it's not me. It's not my account. It's exhausting. It's awful. It's awful. It makes me regret doing it. I totally regret doing all of that. I do. I regret it completely. So yeah, if you're listening, go find that ICU doctor and report it, or at least go comment and be like, hey, this is fake. Please. No, this guy is not, please. I would appreciate it. I would really, really appreciate it. So thank you. Let me do another email. It's nice to share people's, emails and kind of community here. This is from Brian, last name Well. He said, so glad to hear your voice again. Everybody was really happy that I put a podcast after several months, so it is very encouraging, and it does make me want to come back. So glad to hear your voice again, even if less often. I think I had come across a somewhat reliable sounding source somewhere that part of the reason you had stepped away from everything publicly, and particularly political topics, was because of threats which made me both deeply sad and deeply angry. Brian, that is not true. Fortunately, I did not have any threats of any sort, physical or not. I just wanted to get out ahead of the game before anything like that happened. So nothing happened, either professionally or otherwise. No threat made me step away. I've kind of already talked about why I kind of stepped away. I'm just finishing a book that I think you might find interesting if you haven't read it. Constantine's Sword by James Carroll. Nope, I haven't read it. I've never read anything by James Carroll. The history addressed is important, and that's why I originally picked it up. However, it also includes a theological ecumenical argument for the essential role of pluralism and humanism in Christian, specifically Catholic doctrine, that even though I myself am not Christian, I found both moving and compelling. I think there's a good chance you may already know this book, but just in case you don't, I recommend. I hope all is well. Thank you again for all you do. Brian, thank you. I haven't heard of that book. I've heard of James Carroll. I've never read James Carroll, and that looks good. I'll add it to my list. So I appreciate it. Thanks for emailing in. Okay, let me get to, I want to get to a book that I'm very excited to talk about. All right. It is Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. It is a biography of Alexander Hamilton. So I'm not big into American Revolutionary history. I just don't vibe well with the American Revolution. I know that sounds weird. I find it hard to sympathize with a bunch of rich slavers complaining about paying taxes, which was basically the impetus for the war. But I mean, don't get me wrong, overthrowing the monarchy and drafting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were insane achievements. It's just that the cause of the war that I've never really found that compelling, especially since nothing really changed for non-rich Americans after the war. It was an aristocratic revolution, just like the French Revolution was. That's why it just doesn't, it's never, I've never, I don't know, it's just never, I've never gotten like the glory of it. But let me tell you what this book did for me, Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. It made me care. It did. It made me care more. How did it make me care? Because it showed the constitutional framers for what they were. Brilliant, arrogant pricks who mostly all hated each other. The utter drama between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson was insane. These men absolutely hated each other from the beginning. And you always hear, I don't know, you feel like I always hear, oh, the framers weren't big on political parties. They were afraid of political parties. Not really. They started political parties right from the beginning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just focus on Alexander Hamilton. He was an absolutely impressive and amazing person. He was no paragon of virtue. He cheated on his wife probably more than once. He was also very arrogant and insufferable, but this guy almost entirely was responsible for framing most of the American institutions that we have right now, like the Treasury, Wall Street, the Navy, a central bank. He greatly strengthened even the idea of a federal government when it assumed all of the states' war debt, and then he leveraged that debt into liquid credit to keep the Union together. All his contemporaries thought he was a royalist for the king, like he was this covert monarchist, because what the problem was, they lacked the vision that he had. Hamilton was probably at least 50 years, 100 years ahead of his time in terms of fiscal and monetary policy. And here's what he did from a financial standpoint. I'm going to get just a little wonky, but it's really, really impressive. So right after the Revolutionary War, all of the states were deeply in debt. Right? Each state had their own debt, right? And there was no federal government. This is right after the war. This is before George Washington. There was no federal government. They just had a bunch of states that had run up debt. So Hamilton was in the first cabinet with George Washington. He also fought alongside George Washington. He was the first secretary of the treasurer. And he took all of that debt and he consolidated it under federal debt. So he took all of the state's debt and took it under the wing of the federal government. The creditors had sold like soldiers' pay certificates or state war IOUs or Continental Congress notes before the end of the war. And all of those were pretty worthless. Hamilton assumed all the debt and offered new treasury bonds to the creditors instead of their crappy like IOUs or Continental Congressional notes. He offered them United States Treasury bonds. Instead of cash, they got long-term federal bonds with 3 to 6% interest, all backed by a new tax scheme that Hamilton imposed with tariffs, or the famous whiskey tax, if you recall the whiskey tax rebellion that happened, I believe, once John Adams was president, and Hamilton, Washington had to go put down. Hamilton wanted rich Americans to hold government debt because it formed a sort of political glue that kept the Union together and supported federal authority. And he got it. He got it. I mean, he basically created federalism by assuming the state debt. U.S. bonds were then widely held, traded, and accepted as collateral, or basically as a new type of cash. So Alexander Hamilton refinanced war debt into a new economic and speculative infrastructure. He legitimized the U.S. government overnight. He turned the debt into an asset and basically created Wall Street and the beginnings of American capitalism. He was really the only one at the time to understand this. Maybe others understood it, but many did not appreciate it. Thomas Jefferson feared that Hamilton was creating a new aristocracy, and he was. I mean, he was, right? But it was an aristocracy that kept the Union together. So he basically created a new aristocracy, but shifted it to allegiance and politically gluing the Union together. What's interesting thinking about this, the politics the politics of this time are interesting, and they don't directly map to left and right ideologies today. Hamilton was a type of progressive in that he wanted central authority. He wanted to progress the central, he wanted to progress the society to centrally federal government, and he wanted the rich to back the government. But today, that would be considered conservative, right, or neoliberal. Hamilton was also a staunch anti-abolitionist. He also, that was very progressive for the day. He also supported the Sedition and Alien Acts, which were considered quite conservative and definitely authoritarian. Jefferson, on the other hand, was conservative in that he favored agrarian landowner oligarchy. He also favored slavery. He was a slaver. And he also backed the Jacobins in the French Revolution. But that later part, the Jacobins today would be considered very progressive or anarchists, right? But Hamilton, I think ultimately, he's definitely the progressive of the day because he was trying to progress the state into a functioning government, where Jefferson favored decentralized power which is kind of a leftist thing, but he wanted to retain it in the pre-existing land-ruling elites. So they're both aristocratic. Let's not get that wrong. Jefferson was very much an aristocrat. I don't think he believed he was, but he was, right? The funny thing is, when Jefferson became president, he realized he could not dismantle what Hamilton had done, because what Hamilton had done was the underpinnings of the economy. And then Hamilton became very loathed by James Madison and John Adams and Van Buren. He became really, really low. He always had the political backing of George Washington, of course. And then let's not forget Aaron Burr, right? Aaron Burr was very much loathed Hamilton. So not only did Hamilton fight in the Revolutionary War alongside George Washington, but he was the first treasurer. That cannot be understated. He became Inspector General during Adams' administration, and he founded West Point, basically, and kind of the VA system. He also, my impression, he was a pretty ethical and overall a pretty good human being. As I said, he was a staunch abolitionist. He was a dutiful father, very, very attending to his children. He adopted children with his wife, Eliza. They donated generously, and there was never any evidence that he extorted money to benefit himself, like all of his political enemies said. They all said that he was extorting money, but he didn't. When he left Washington's cabinet, he was not richer at all, and he actually had tons of debt, and he had to go back to Wall Street in New York and work as a lawyer for years. He did not die rich, Alexander Hamilton. And then the end of Hamilton's life is definitely sad. He became embittered and lost a lot of political clout as the Federalist influence evaporated. The Republicans and their Southern power would rule the executive branch for the next 30 to 40 years. And then that set the stage for the Civil War later. Hamilton died a young, I think in his late 40s, a young and tragic death when he was basically murdered by Aaron Burr during their fateful duel. Aaron Burr and Hamilton known each other for 20 years. They were both lawyers. Aaron Burr was the vice president of Thomas Jefferson at the time that he killed Hamilton. I think what happened is Aaron Burr, he really played too dirty of a political game. He was constantly trying to play the Federalists against the Anti-Federalists, and he wanted to be president, and he basically lost all of his political clout. And what seemed to happen is, after 20 years of this, I think he just hated Hamilton enough that he wanted to kill him. And he knew Hamilton would not back down from a duel, so he offered a duel, and he killed him. And then, a lot of the end of this book really does focus on Eliza Hamilton, who lived to be 97. 97. She was clearly a passionate wife and a caring mother, and she dedicated the rest of her life to honoring the legacy of Alexander Hamilton. And she clearly is a remarkable woman who deserves her own biography. Anyway, book was so energizing and revelatory for me. It's the best book of early American history I've ever read. I highly recommend it. Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. All right, let me just end on a fiction note. I finished the Sun Eater series by Christopher Verrocchio. It is a space opera. It's a 7-book series. It's a first-person POV of a young aristocratic young man disillusioned with his aristocratic father on a planet, and he rebels in a kind of an unusual way. It's got some underpinnings of Dune and Roman Empire kind of politics, but it stands on its own legs, and it's a very, very good series if you're into space operas and sci-fi. There's a lot of arcane mystery, there's a lot of political intrigue, and a lot of interesting relationships. I finished the last book a few days ago called Shadows Upon Time, the highly anticipated one. It came out last November. I just want to say this, if you're familiar with the series. I was underwhelmed with the last book. I wasn't disappointed, but I was a little underwhelmed. It was too long. And a lot of his other books were very long books, but they didn't feel too long. This felt too long. The plot did not justify what happened, and it was kind of a predictable ending, and it just kind of ended. And I didn't really like the characters Cassandra and Celine. I think they were very flat. Not a lot of arcs. They were just not interesting. So I don't know. I finished it. I was a little. I was a little underwhelmed. I still really, really think it's a great series, and I do highly recommend the whole series. What you want to do, if this sounds interesting, read the first book, Shadows. What is it called? Empire of Silence. That's probably the weakest of the seven. Although I think maybe Shadows of Time might be the weakest, but I'm an outlier. Read the first one. If you thought it was okay, keep reading at least till the third book, Demon in White, and then see how you like it. If you hated the first one, then it might not be for you. But I do recommend you check it out, and I did enjoy it. Anyway, I'll wrap it up. Thanks for joining me, ICU Doc Talk, once again. What else do I have to say? Oh, yeah. Reminder, I have a YouTube channel now. It's called Wick Welker Reads. I will put the link here in the podcast so you can click on it. I have a new website. It's wickwelker.com. WICKWELKER.com. That's my author stuff. I'm an author. I've been writing books for 10 years. I write sci-fi. I'm writing lots of stuff. I got a new book coming out this year. I'll tell you more about that. I'm finishing up a trilogy called the Dark Law series. The first book is called The Dark Theory. If you want to check out my book, I have the first half of it free on my website. You can download it if you sign up for my newsletter. So go to wickwelker.com, check out my website, and then join the newsletter, put in your email, and then you'll immediately get a PDF, or not a PDF, an ebook of the first half of that book. It's a long book. It's like 800 pages. So it's a huge intro to this big world that I'm building. And I'm finishing that series this year. It's a trilogy. It's science fantasy. It's got self-aware robots. It takes place in the far future. Check it out. Follow me on YouTube, Wick Welker Reads, wickwelker.com. You can email me about the podcast, icudoctorecmo@gmail.com, icudoctorecmo, ECMO @gmail.com. Email me for ideas and prod me to make episodes, because that really does push me to make episodes. So do that, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.